Hello and welcome back to the Armchair QBs. It's been a long time, but we're here now. We decided to take a little bit of a break,
A hiatus.
a hiatus, if you will, just as we let the free agency kind of swing into action, because there's a lot of other podcasts out there that would just waste your time. There's no news. We could speculate. We don't know. They don't know. Nobody knows apart from the people who are actually going to sign the contracts. So it's absolutely pointless recording anything until we're actually into the bedlam that is free agency, isn't that right, Dan?
Yeah, I think we can only really do a kind of maybe preview, and even then we'd be kind of force feeding the same stuff that's kicking it out just now. But now that we've actually had the kind of first wave of free agents being signed, we can see we're not winners and losers, but certainly have some takes on what's happened so far, some of the surprises and some of the good pickups. So we'll see where we get to.
Okay, and where would you like to begin then, Dan?
I would like to start with the New England Patriots, which we always seem to fucking do now, even though Brady's not there. But I think we're going to have to start with their massive spending spree, which is totally unlike them.
Yeah, this was one that I think caught everybody off guard. Certainly everybody that I follow, and they've just been spending money like it's going out of fashion.
146 million guaranteed put out in the first day of free agency.
It was ridiculous. I was seeing quite a few of the football writers that I follow just saying that tells you how much Bill Belichick hated his 2020 team. It's just like, no, fuck them all. Get rid of every single one.
It's just such a departure from what we expect from the Patriots, where they've happily let people walk when they've wanted to, sign big deals and get money uh, for their work. And the Patriots have said, well, we'll pay you this, which is about 50 cents on the dollar from what you would ordinarily get anywhere else. And people left. They would have success in New England, and then they would go make money elsewhere. I mean, that was just standard for what happened. But after last year being the unmitigated disaster that it was, they've obviously just decided, right, we blamed the fact last year that the reason we won the championships was we had used the cap to its fullest extent, and now we were struggling because of it. And they've got quite a large amount of cap room, about 60 plus million, and they've just gone absolutely bananas and addressed spots which the media and Twitter and the ordinary fan would say that they needed to address. Perhaps maybe other than, well, no. I mean they've pretty much dealt with it, but they haven't really addressed some points on the defensive side. So it's really been mostly offensive focused.
Yeah, I really did like the pickup of Judon though.
Well, I think that again was just what was available to them. But I mean, to kind of go through who they've signed. They've signed John Smith, the tight end that formerly played for Tennessee. They've signed Hunter Henry from San Diego, well, not San Diego, LA Chargers. we might have had a hiatus, but we're still making the old mistakes, Cal.
Oh yeah, never change.
No, not at all. They've brought in Kendrick Bourne, which is a kind of low-level wide receiver. I don't think anybody kind of really pegged that he would be one of the first wide receivers taken, but they signed him along with Nelson Aguilar, which solidifies the receiving core. But again, it's not kind of wow signings. But again, that's probably where they're back to their roots and trying to not pay too much for still some good productivity. And as you say, Judon. So it's obvious that they want to get back to kind of multiple tight end sets again. They've re-signed Cam. It's a deal that can pay him up to I think 12 million, but his bonus and base salary are well within ordinary limits, but it's certainly not as limited as the 1 million they signed last time. So they have gone. They've identified needs and they've spent the money, and they've not been afraid to do that.
One thing I found quite interesting about these signings was who the commonality between a lot of them. Certainly the day one deals that got announced. All clients of Drew Rosenhaus.
He's been a busy boy.
So let's see. Jonnu Smith, Godshaw, Trent Brown, and Jalen Mills were all Drew Rosenhaus clients. So I don't know if there was a little bit of back scratching going on there with like you did us a really big favour and solid with how you treated Gronk on the way out, and I mean they do have a good relationship. He took on Antonio Brown for him as well, so there's a little bit of conspiracy Calum coming out there.
And
just wondering how quickly those guys were steered there.
Yeah, I'm not going to agree with you on that one. I just think that the guaranteed money that the Patriots were offering was probably better for these players than anywhere else is willing to offer them. I mean, Matthew Judon wasn't going to get 32 million guaranteed from the Ravens. He was going to get a contract which would have compensated him well, but there wouldn't have been that amount of guaranteed money, I don't think. Same for Johnny Smith. He was never getting plus 30 million guaranteed. And probably Hunter Henry just probably wanted a change of scenery. I mean, he didn't seem to be too appreciated in Los Angeles, even though he has been productive, but he's been hurt a lot. And 25 million for a guy who's been hurt a lot is pretty good money. So I think the vast majority of free agent deals, we always were expecting a lot of kind of 1 year prove-it deals or 1 year deals, and then the TV money would kick in. But in reality, even though the contracts are maybe 3-4 years and shorter, all the guaranteed money is loaded up into the first 2 years. I think that's expected to get the guaranteed money out of the way very early. And then when the TV deals kick in, it's not going to cause too much of a difficulty on their bottom line in the second year. And then they'll be able to assess and get out of contracts relatively quickly if they need to. Because, I mean, I think from kind of Judon and Smith, most of their money is in the first 2 years. And Hunter Henry, most of it is in the first year. And then obviously they become less problematic in the size of the contracts once you kind of get from Aguilar down. So it's the volume of money that they've been willing to give out and what they've targeted, which is interesting for the Patriots, because it's quite obvious that they themselves have said, we really fucked it last year with the way that we approached it. Probably thought we were a little bit Teflon. We definitely weren't. We need to actually go out and get some players and spend some money that we wouldn't ordinarily do to try and get us back and competitive within the division.
And I think that the only question that I still have with them is quarterback. I understand it's not a lot of money to Cam, but I just don't understand re-signing him over. Would you rather have Cam Newton or Jameis Winston?
Well, that's another story. But what was Cam's deal? Cam was still only for 1 year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. Let me just pull this up. I'm on Slow Track just now, so that should be easy enough to get. Yeah, he has just signed for a 1 year deal.
I mean, it does. Even if he signed for 2, I still wouldn't say that would take them out of the race for a quarterback in the draft, which we will come on to in future episodes before April. But I think they just looked at the landscape and how things were settling out, and I think it became apparent that Jimmy G would not be released, or certainly there wasn't the option for bringing somebody in that they thought was going to be better than Cam before free agency started. And one thing that you have to do to make yourself at least viable is to say, we've got a starting quarterback. Now, they'll all be selling the line that Cam Newton's poor year last year was as a result of not having a very good supporting cast. That was all fine. And if you go to players and say in free agency and say, you come here, but you're part of a greater plan, and this is who we're getting. Once you get that one domino to go, you'll get the second one, third one, fourth one, and it all came together. So, I mean, they really kind of revamped their starting offense from a skill position perspective within the first day of free agency.
Yeah,
two tight ends, 2 wide receivers, and it's now a different complexion of how you would consider the New England offense and how it's going to operate.
Double wing for days.
Yes.
And I would love it if they just came out and were just running triple option every single game.
Well, we'll see how that single wing background of Belichick's comes in.
So who else do you think did well this year?
I think it's been pretty sparse. I think the only other team that's really kind of made a big splash to me is the Cardinals now over kind of over three signings, and again, they're the ones that are adding probably the most well recognised names, and then thereafter, all the teams are just kind of adding bits and pieces where and when they needed. I think kind of Joe Thuney going to Kansas City was a big deal for Kansas City. I think they needed to get some better play on the offensive line. Obviously, they don't have a tackle, but that still is a big play for them. I think one of the things is that it's more about who's not been so active in free agency. I think it's surprising that the Jets, haven't been as active. The Jags have signed players at moderate contracts rather than going for any kind of big names in free agency, and the Colts as well who've got lots of cap room, have been pretty limited. So there's three teams who are at the top. Certainly two teams that are at the top of the draft, and the Colts who have the most amount of cap space available, and they've been very, very, very quiet. So I don't think really anybody else stands out as saying, they've done an excellent job. I think probably the only thing you could say, even though it's not really getting free agents, it was Tampa Bay managing to retain Shaq Barrett, Chris Godwin, Gronk. They managed to retain their free agents. So for obviously Patriots are different. They're going out and bringing completely new players into their building, but not the Patriots, not the Broncos, the Bucks managing to keep hold of their free agents and move some money around and be able to do that is probably the next team that would be doing well out of free agency, even though it's not really free agency for them. They're just re-signing players.
And I suppose one thing that we should maybe segue on to here is that, we're into the first week here, and there are still a lot of top-level wide receivers that are left on the board looking for deals. Now, the chatter from agents and to the NFL insiders, your Schuster's, the Diana Rossini's and everything has been that the wide receiver market is severely deflated. That probably is to do with the fact that the cap has gone down significantly this year from what it was previously. Teams don't have as much money. And also, I think we're going to reach a point where we look at the wide receiver market the way we look at the running back market going forward. Like, there's just so much, depth in the draft and new guys coming through that do you necessarily need to pay for someone who isn't an upper echelon wide receiver?
Last year, it was the 2020 draft is the best wide receiver class in 20 years. This year, it's the 2021 receiver class is better than the 2020 class. So that, for me, is the reason for the depreciation in wide receivers and not getting and contracts not being given out to wide receivers. That is the main reason. There is, again, going to be what's the term I'm looking for? Not a surplus, saturation is what I'm looking for. Much like we had with potential quarterbacks coming in last year and this year. But for wide receiver, there's too many that are available in the draft and too many available in free agency for a team to go and pay that big money. They might want a proven commodity. That's fine, but only at the right price in this year of a depreciated cap. So a number of factors are involved in why wide receivers aren't going. But at the same time, Kenny Golladay has got to be attractive for somebody as a known commodity. Curtis Samuel, in the right scheme, will be an attractive proposition. Juju Smith-Schuster is probably the prime example of a player who has shown ability, but is he definitely going to change your offense and get touchdowns, get yards, be a chain mover? He does dirty work, that's fine. But at the same time, he needed Antonio Brown in the offense to be great. He's not number one. He might be a low end number two and a good slot guy. And you don't want to give too much money out when you can get a lot of good slot guys in the draft. So, there's three names straight off the top, and we haven't mentioned Will Fuller or Sammy Watkins, who again are known names in the NFL, proven commodities to a point, and they're just not getting a sniff.
I just think it's one of those ones where you could look at all of those guys and you can put a question mark on them all. Kenny Galladay, there's, like attitude questions around him. Juju
No, I think
Smith-Schuster.
that attitude towards the previous administration in Detroit, more from what I understand.
Yeah, but I think that there was maybe how he was communicating, and that's kind of what's stuck out. I think everybody had issues with the previous regime at Detroit, but it was maybe how they went about and handled it, which, fair or not, I'm not, really one to say. But that's a reason why you could see him not being picked up. Juju Smith-Schuster, like you say, he's not really a one. He's a two, but maybe a mid-range two.
Yeah, two slash.
Will Fuller constantly injured.
Or on roids.
Yeah, so you're not going to give him anything. Now, we don't know if it was roids. It was just performance enhancing. Could have been Adderall. And then, you've got a veteran like T.Y. Hilton still out there.
I think the thing about T.Y. Hilton again is he's been pretty disappointing overall, regardless of what you say about the quarterback play. He's still been pretty disappointing. He too has been injured, and it sounds like he's going to go back to Kansas City on a kind of, you're our guy, but we're still not going to pay you, and would you not just prefer to be here with some familiarity rather than going somewhere else and uplifting and uprooting your life for just an extra $2 million. Now, obviously, $2 million is a lot of money, but at the same time, people have got families and they make these decisions, and it's all about, it's all about a strange dynamic. I'm pretty sure if somebody offered me $2 million, I'd move instantly. But he's been paid a lot already over his career, and I think he might just want to stay with the Colts because I don't think anybody again is going to be offering him too much money.
No, I don't think he'll get too much money. But he's at that stage, where he's like the wily veteran wide receiver, where you get sometimes see a team at least making a move like that. Good locker room guy, get him in to help with your young core. One that I don't know how you would feel on it, but I wouldn't mind him being with the Ravens.
Nah, just not dynamic enough.
I just think it's somebody can get his arm around Hollywood and just try and get him in line. Just be like, look, this is what you need to focus on. But yeah, that's the type of pickup that you would expect there. But obviously, we'll see how the market shakes out, and it could be that a lot of these guys have to wait until after the draft as well.
I think that would be a stretch. I think veteran. You want to get veterans in before the draft. To me, I appreciate that you can kind of pick them up for cheaper, obviously after, because they say, well, we've got a full kind of full training camp roster. If you want to come in, we'll give you some money, but it won't make it guaranteed. But it's very, very difficult to kind of be attractive at that spot. So I don't know. I just think that you will see Kenny Galladay signed, you will see Will Fuller signed, you will see Juju Smith-Schuster signed before the draft, but it will be 2 one-year deals. I think we're now past the first wave of free agent signings over all positions, and it's quite clear that that's where the majority of the money has gone now, and anybody else is now picking up the dregs, and I doubt that you'll see multi-year deals for a lot of people.
No, I don't think. Yeah, I think these are all just going to be the short-term variety. But for me, if I'm running a team, I don't know at this point. If I've got a good mid-range first-round pick, I wouldn't be rushing to sign any of these wide receivers. I'd just wait.
Again, not for money. I would sign them. I mean, I think they're still valuable. I think you still would want them on your team. But I mean, yes, you've then got the draft in addition. I don't think you would be signing Juju Smith-Schuster and then neglecting to sign a wide receiver.
I just don't think I could spend my money better elsewhere. And like you say, it would be a 1-year rental, which even if it was successful, he's either going to walk or I'm going to have to tag him.
Well, that's why you draft a wide receiver as well.
Yeah, so I'd just
give yourself the best of both worlds.
No, I would just leave them and try and address needs elsewhere.
No, I mean, not necessarily even a mid-round pick. If you say that we're going to start treating wide receivers like running backs, then why would you spend a mid-round pick on a wide receiver that's middle of the first round grade, when you can go trade back, or if you've got 2 picks between 30 and 50, you could pick up two in that range at half the price.
It's a good point. My only reason for doing it just now would be because I don't think the rest of the NFL is at that point where they value them.
I can tell you that if you want to be like the Patriots were last year, you value wide receivers. It's a passing league. I appreciate people who think that you can just magic them up. The Steelers do a good job of picking wide receivers every year, but the Patriots don't. Patriots haven't drafted a good wide receiver. So Edelman, and even then he was a 6th round quarterback at that point.
Yeah, so, no, it's been pretty abysmal.
So I think you have to be careful when you're saying, "Oh, we'll just kind of leave it. We don't have to worry about it too much." I think much like corner, it's better to have difficult problems to make on cut down day rather than wishing you'd picked people up in the draft, or not waited until the 4th round to pick a certain position, depending on what you are. So it really depends where they're going to, what teams are going to attack wide receiver in free agency and what they think. If you get Justin Jefferson, yeah, that's grand. But I still think, this year it's going to be so deep, the wide receiver class, that you could trade back in between 30 and 50, pick 2 wide receivers, or certainly in the second, maybe just a second round, the 3rd round pick for a wide receiver, and you'd be doing fine. But I still don't think that stops you from taking a veteran on in case those guys don't develop quickly enough in year 1, and you've got a kind of ready-made backup plan in one of these receivers that haven't been signed yet. I would take Kenny Golladay at the Ravens over T.Y. Hilton any day.
Yeah, I think that's one of those ones where I really think the Ravens need to make a move and spend the money on a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Hopefully your passing game's better now, though.
I wouldn't guarantee that.
So what moves did we like this year, or that have happened so far? What was one of your favourites?
I'm not really a fan of any of them. I suppose if I'm trying to be objective about it, I would say Tennessee signing Bud Dupree would be, on paper, again, a good signing for them. He was good last year. Sorry, it was good the last 2 years, really, and they severely needed a pass rush. They managed to identify somebody and went after and give him a monster contract. But at the same time, they've attacked pass rusher before, and they cut Vic Beasley during the season last year, and then they had Clowney do absolutely nothing for them last year as well. So is it the players or is it the scheme? What is it? We'll have to wait and see. But I think out of the top 20, I mean, 9 of the top 10 free agents on any kind of list that you would see signed with the team that was going to be they were going to be leaving. So after that, you've got kind of from 10 to 20. That's the only real one that I thought it's a good player, and they've managed to do well there.
That was an interesting one for me because on paper, if you look at what the Titans have lost this off-season and what position they were in cap-wise, it was a strange one for me going for giving all that money to Bud Dupree. A great player. I really like him. And I think they'll get more out of him than what they got out of Clowney and Beasley. But I just think they've got a lot of holes. So I'd have the Titans circled as one of the teams that are going to regress quite badly this year.
Well, let's just have a quick kind of hypothesis about your needing to address edge, okay? And you've got the choice between Bud Dupree, good player on a good Steelers defense, or Trey Hendrickson, the third rusher on a good New Orleans defense. Now, is Trey Hendrickson getting 13 sacks last year because he, Cameron Jordan, Sheldon Rankins, the interior of that defensive front meant that there was more one-on-one opportunities and he mopped up, because of that? Would you rather, have Bud Dupree for 5 years at $82 million or Trey Hendrickson for 4 years at $60? I mean, that's your two two comparable situations where I'm saying in both of those situations I would rather have Bud Dupree, and even though he didn't have as many sacks as Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, no, I would rather have Bud Dupree because there's a proven track record there.
Over the last 2 years, it wasn't great. It wasn't great for when he first came out, but he certainly kind of turned on over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think he's been pretty good, and I don't mind paying him. And I think it was one of those ones that the Steelers would have re-signed him if the cap wasn't what it is. I mean, because in effect, although the cap went down 10 million, it's effectively 20 million because all these teams have been banking on year-over-year growth of 10%. So a lot of teams were banking on it being 208 million this year or thereabout. So I think everybody ended up in a bit of a bad state. So I can understand why some of these guys walked. It wasn't an indictment on their abilities. It was just where the team ended up being financially.
Nope.
So for me, a move that baffled me, although it didn't really baffle me because it was the most money, but JJ Watt to Arizona. As much as I like the Cliff Kingsbury experiment, I don't want to see JJ there.
It's strange. I obviously just twigged with you saying that we haven't actually had a kind of recorded discussion about this since that happened. He's got a history with Vance Joseph. He's got a history with DeAndre Hopkins. It seems as though it was more about personal relationships and money than potentially going to a contender. Now, maybe that's because they set out their vision for the off-season, what they were going to do and where they were going to be by the time opening day comes around. But certainly at the time of the signing, it did seem like he was, basically signing for more guaranteed money than he was being offered, but then he was scheduled to make in Houston. And it just didn't quite fit with what we expected him to do, which is why it's the NFL. We should always expect the unexpected.
Yeah, and it's why we never did these preview episodes because nobody would have predicted that. It was all you would have
Green Bay or the Browns, or the Browns, and the Cardinals.
Yeah, just out of left field. So it's a weird one. But then I saw today that they've gone off and signed AJ Green, which is
again a bit perplexing.
Yeah, it's like Arizona is really embracing its reputation for being a retirement home or a retirement state.
So please forgive the small gaps. I mean, Calum has just become a father. I think he's a little bit kind of sleep shy at the moment, and we're not well practiced. So if there are some gaps in today's recording, please just apologise.
Yes, new parenthood is a joy, and whatever anybody tells you, just always sleep as much as possible before, because you will be deprived of it. But as much as I love them, they are little bastards. Right. The one thing about this, before we went on our little hiatus, there was all this talk about the movement that was going to happen with the quarterbacks. And I don't want to spend too long on it because, something could happen before the draft. But it certainly does not look like we're getting the shuffles that were, kind of bandied about before free agency started.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of, better the devil might be coming into kind of some organisations thinking. And again, the breast cap here, it really would only help teams which had little to no problems in getting rid of quarterbacks, such as Oakland or San Francisco, where getting rid of David Carr or Garoppolo would actually not hurt them too much in the cap. But we know from the discussions when Stafford, Goff was happening, Wentz was happening, that the Raiders were getting phone calls for Derek Carr, and they were told politely, no, he's our quarterback, which was a strange position, which I don't think 12 months ago you would have expected that. I think if you had said 12 months ago that someone's calling the Raiders with the second round pick for Derek Carr, they would be taking it. It was expected he would be out the door, that this was the last year, but he's obviously done enough to solidify his position for at least another year there. And then when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo, they're putting pieces on that offensive line. They've just signed Alex Mack, and they've just signed Trent Williams to a monster, highest in NFL history for a tackle deal. And it seems as though they're more willing to try and address the other pieces, because Jimmy Garoppolo at $25 million might just be better for this year, and get everything set for the year after, and just keep Jimmy Garoppolo because he can do a job for you. He's shown that he can do that, and we might just have been a little bit too quick to say that teams were going to cut bait with some of the kind of middle tier quarterbacks, or the kind of middle to lower tier quarterbacks, and because that hasn't happened, there hasn't been the domino effect, and there hasn't been that rush for lots of musical chairs to get new quarterbacks into new surroundings.
I think also because we haven't had the monster QB trade that we were talking about before our break of Watson or Wilson. Now, Wilson's not going anywhere because the three teams that were on his list, they've all gone.
Well, there was four, and they've offered, but I mean, the only team left is the Bears, and they've been told to go shove it.
Yeah, and the Bears have just signed Dalton as well, so it seems like they've kind of just given up and just moved on.
Well, when you offer 3 ones, a 3, and 2 starters on defense, which was what was offered to Seattle apparently, that's pretty much all you can throw at it. That is your best offer, I think. You can't do more than 3 ones. Another pick and 2 players. Very, very difficult to kind of get better than that from the Bears, and they've been told no. So I think, and one thing that is clear is that Carolina, I think, have to be considered the number one team in pursuit of Deshaun Watson at the moment. They have not been aggressive in free agency. They've taken some interesting decisions about targeting certain offensive linemen. They haven't gone after the top tier offensive linemen. They've gone after, they've gone after the kind of middle bracket of offensive linemen where they're not having to, pay as much money. I think they are looking to keep as much room as possible so that they can fit Deshaun Watson in. And I think it's only a matter of time before Deshaun Watson is Carolina Panther.
Yeah, I don't know what that deal is going to look like. It'll be interesting. It's another one we could speculate until the cows come home, but to be honest,
Well, I mean, they got to remember the main reason is that it probably would be Bridgewater in the other direction, which would, because they've signed Tyrod Taylor in Houston, it probably would be Bridgewater in the other direction. That would be like a dead cap hit to the Panthers, and they still then need the room to fit Watson underneath that. So I think if it was going to be the Jets, it would have happened by now. I think if it was going to be anybody else, it would have happened by now. I think the only real team in the running for Deshaun Watson is Carolina, and I think, given the way that things are going in Houston, we thought it was at its worst. It's now getting even worse in Houston, with certain allegations being lobbied about, and the lawyer representing the woman being basically a close friend of Cal McNair's. It stinks to high heaven, and I just think it's a matter of time before Watson's out there.
Yeah, as soon as that came out, it smelt like a smear campaign, because I don't know any lawyer that announces a case on Instagram.
But I don't understand the strategy behind that either. I know we've away from free agency, we said we weren't going to do it, but I don't understand the strategy either. Surely, if you've got someone who's going to be subject to the NFL's conduct policy, which might lead to suspension, that's going to lower the draft. That's going to lower any potential price for a player rather than increase it, or make him want to stay in place. Or scare teams off. I don't know what the strategy is behind it. It's to scare teams off for making making an offer, then it doesn't really make sense either, because I think it can only end badly for how this allegation is started.
I think if you're trying to find reason with an idiot, you're going to end up being very frustrated. That is the most incompetent ownership group in the NFL. So there's no reason behind what they do. I mean, Dan Snyder is just looking on amazed at the shit that they're able to pull off. It's incredible. But yeah, that one I think it's probably going to be Carolina. I'm more interested in the Jets one, actually. You know, now when you bring them up with what do they do when it comes to the draft? Because are they going to take someone, or I would have thought they would have moved on from Sam Darnold regardless at this point. Maybe the offers aren't there for him, but if you're taking someone, or if you're after Deshaun, I would have thought you would have moved them.
It seems really strange that they haven't tried to get any value for him just now. I mean, look, they could eventually just cut bait. We will have an episode where we talk about Kyle Wilson and how I am really, really struggling to understand why everyone says that he must go at 2, he must go at 2, he must go at 2 after Lawrence. And maybe perhaps there's an indication there that they're not going to take a quarterback at 2. I mean, if the Jets were able to, I think they would trade down maybe 4 or 5 spots and start bidding more for that number 2 spot, so that someone can get up and maybe even get the tackle that they wanted, or the wide receiver that they wanted, or just whoever might be wanting to jump up in front of a team that's at kind of 5, 6, 7, 8, and get up that way, because it's not a guarantee, I think, that they take a quarterback, even though everyone says they must take a quarterback. And I would not be surprised if Sam Darnold was starting quarterback for the New York Jets at the beginning of next season.
No, I think that's... I wouldn't be shocked by it. It's just, I guess it's quite hard to see that happening after, all the weeks that have happened this off-season, if that makes sense. We're looking at quarterbacks, we're not happy with all this. Surely that's bad for his morale, and then they decide to stick with him. Especially when he had those issues of seeing ghosts and everything. He'd already been taking a bit of a beating.
His time in New York has not been good, because it's been the classic turnover in coach's situation, and the second coach being far worse than the first coach. Whatever offensive staff he had when Todd Bowles was there in the Todd Bowles' last year, then becomes Adam Gase, and it's an absolute cluster. So has Sam Darnold ever really had a chance in New York? Detractors will say, well, he should have made everyone else better. He should have been able to drag them, forward a little bit. But his supporters will say, well, he has looked good at points. He's looked perfectly competent as a starting quarterback. But the problem is people don't want competent, they want superstar immediately. And his opportunities may have run out. I mean, it's just one of these ones where if they moved on from him, not surprised at all. If they kept him, traded down, or if they stayed and got the other tackle, got Penny Sewell, and then they had 2 tackles to protect him for the next 10 years. And if they'd gone out and done something about on the wide receiver position in free agency, I would maybe be more inclined to believe my own argument. But I can certainly understand why the Jets have got draft picks from the Seahawks. They could trade back and get more draft picks over the next 2 years, still keep Sam Darnold, who was picked 3 overall, and they could just give him one last year before they finally gave up on him, and just put some assets around the team a bit. I just think that's perfectly legitimate to think that's what the Jets are going to do, rather than just give up on Sam Darnold. Even though around about 6 months, I would have, again, quite happily believed that they would have traded him to anybody that was willing to give her a 3rd round pick.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just we'll see what comes of this, and laugh accordingly or react accordingly.
the future is still. I mean, you got to remember, after day one of free agency, we don't know what any team looks like. It's still murky as hell going forward. So over the next week, the rest of the free agents will kind of get fleshed out on deals, and we'll see if we're right about the majority of them being the kind of 1 year, high salary, low bonus, whatever you wish, to kind of get through this bad year of a depreciated cap. And then everybody will start preparing for the draft, because all the mock drafts and all the kind of needs deemed to be filled will be addressed to a certain extent in free agency. And then, I mean, what everyone was saying that the Patriots would need to draft has changed in a day because of their action in free agency. So let's just see how we get through a week, and then we can start maybe picking apart and seeing where teams are going to go.
Okay. And is there anything else that you want to touch on?
No, just I'm well out of practice, Well out of practice, good to get back into the swing of things. Hopefully between now and the draft, we'll be able to get some good quarterback podcasts and some good analysis going, and you can get some sleep, and maybe we'll bring some other people on in before the draft, and we'll see where we're at.
I think that sounds like an excellent plan. So a short episode this week, just to get you guys all back into the habit of listening to us and our wonderful insight. We'll be back next week, like Dan says. There'll be more free agency reactions, and we'll start to have a better idea, and we can maybe start to look ahead with a little bit more thinking towards the draft as well when we talk about next week, after we see how teams have progressed.
I think we should try and get some kind of listener participation in during this lull in the run up. So maybe try and ask anyone who is still listening or who started to listen again that if you've got any questions or any kind of hypotheses themselves, or conspiracy theories, because we love conspiracy theories, to send them in to us so that we can maybe discuss them, break them down, and see if it takes us somewhere interesting.
Yeah, and you can do that by tweeting us at Armchair Pod, or just DMing us on Instagram as well, Armchair Pod there, and we're on Facebook as well, Armchair Podcast. So you'll be able to find us and tell us your theories, and we don't believe in libel law, so we'll probably read them out.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay, and with that, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.